Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Root of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. Today, my guest is Mathapelo Seopela, who is a postdoc researcher. In this episode, we learn about how her keen interest in the poor water quality in her community led her to pursue studies in science, and later leading to her pursuing her environmental chemistry career. We also discuss the importance of scientific researches and the misconception of it not being a real job. Lastly, we also talk about mental health care in the post-grad environment and so much more. Do stay tuned. Hi, Mathapelo.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure, and I'm so excited to be here.
So am I. So let's just get right into it. Can you just tell us about yourself, where you're from, your age, etc.?
I am Mathapelo Seopela, as you rightfully said. I'm 30 years old, and I am from Mathapelo, which is the place of coal in the Mpumalanga province in South Africa. I am the third of four girls. My dad was the only boy for a long time at our house. So I don't know how you coped with that, but yeah, that's all about me.
All right, cool. So away from the science stuff, for people who are listening, can you just explain to us what your name actually means?
Well, my name comprises of two parts. So there's Ma, which means mother, and Tapelo, which is Betty. So my whole name means mother of prayer. But my parents wanted a boy. And then I was born, and they realized, oh my gosh, it's a girl. And then they just put the Tapelo.
Oh, because there was already two girls beforehand. Hey.
Yeah, so they were like, we hope it's a boy. And you know how old age people were? They didn't go to gynecologists. So they looked at a person and was like, oh, your nose is so big, you're going to get a boy. You look so ugly, you're going to get a girl. They didn't know.
So it was those old wives' tales, hey? So it's, no, but at least they improvised nicely. And here you are.
Yeah.
All right, so you are a postdoc researcher, right? But we'll get into that just now. But I want you to take us back and to rewind on how you actually got into your field, and of your field of chemistry, which many people, including myself, I just remember in university first year, because as a science major, you have to do chemistry in the first semester. Ooh, I ran away from that. How did you actually end up here? So I just want us to backtrack all the way back from the beginning.
So since my high school life, we have to choose streams. So it's either you choose science or you choose business-based subjects. So from the get-go, I decided that I wanted to do science-based subjects. As I said in the beginning, I'm from Mathapelo, where all of the coal, or 80% of the coal that's actually used for electricity generation and that's exported is dug out from there. So I was in constant contact and fascinated by all of the things that were happening. So as time went by, I realized that my parents and I, and our whole community, in fact, couldn't drink water from the taps in Witbank, Mathapelo, which is where I'm from. And I was always curious, like, why can't we drink water from the tap? So at first, the water used to always be so murky. And then that evolved to us opening the tap and having probably like 10% of solid material just suspended at the bottom of the glass. So you could actually literally see two layers of sand and of water. So this actually broke my heart, and I was also curious still, why is this happening and why aren't they fixing it? So I suppose that naturally propelled me to doing science, but more so to doing chemistry, because obviously in my mind I was probably thinking about what molecules or what molecular interactions are happening here, and how is this going to affect the community at large. So undergraduate, I did analytical chemistry. Then I
Mm-hmm.
became fascinated about the measurements and the instrumentation that's used to interpret what's happening in the environment. And then slowly I progressed to doing environmental chemistry, which goes back to my childhood also, which is why I think it kind of pushed me in that direction. Because then I was interested in looking at the chemistry of the environment then.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of started with that because I wanted to solve the problems from my community. But in the bigger scheme of things, I started to see how this was impacting other communities globally, and I wanted to play a role into fostering that change.
Okay, fascinating. So your upbringing had played a lot of influence. But I just want to go all the way back because um, I just want you to explain the difference between analytical chemistry and environmental chemistry. I think when I, personally also naivety, the naive side of me knows when I think chemistry, I just think hydrogen bonds, molecular bonds. So, if you could just explain, because you said in your undergrad you did analytical and then later on you progressed to environmental. So, I just want the difference between the two for people out there.
Okay, so I want to just start off with the fundamentals. Chemistry is a foundation of life, right?
Yeah.
Within the field of chemistry, there are different subsets. So this could be physical chemistry, organic chemistry,
All right.
environmental chemistry, or analytical chemistry. But you could also use the tools from each of these subsets to, I don't know, propagate whatever it is that you're currently studying further. Because in the
Mm,
current climate, we are focusing more on interdisciplinary research than
yes.
hard research, as I would put it in 1950 something.
Mm,
So, environmental chemistry, in this sense, and um, in the application that I chose to do it in, is looking at how molecules, organic molecules and inorganic molecules, interact with environmental organisms, how they travel in the environment, and why they land up where they do, and what effects do these have on higher organisms. And that could be fish, and people
okay.
eat fish. So, how does that affect people? So it's
Oh.
basically at where does the chemical compound come from? How is
Mm-hmm.
it produced? How does it leave its initial source? Where does it land up? And what is its interaction or interactions with other organisms or with the matrix itself? So that could be how long does it live in the water? Does it actually stay in the water or does it go to the sediment? And what happens between the sediment and the water phase? If there's a big flood, do those chemicals go back into the water phase? And what does that mean for the fish? And what does that mean for the people that are drinking that water? So, in
Mm.
its fundamentals, it's understanding what the chemical is, how it behaves, and how could you actually prevent that from happening in the future?
All right. So it's like a chain. It's like a chain reaction sort of.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh. All right. So this is the focus of your research, and like I said earlier, you are a postdoc researcher. But for somebody out there who doesn't know what a postdoc researcher, can you elaborate on that? And then also further, I want you to just explain because while you elaborate, I know you're going to explain that it's the stage that comes after PhD, but I'm going to let you elaborate. But, I want you to explain how you got into this after your PhD, especially from like, African households
Mm-hmm.
where they assume they really want you, they want you, they push us to study, which is great. But there's that time where everyone is like, so when are you going to get a real job? Um,
for the purposes of helping out back at home, which is also known as black tax. So I just want you to explain the misconception about how this might not be considered, inverted commas, a real job because you are still in the academic or schooling environment.
I suppose it also depends on the environment that you're in. So in my case, my family is very supportive, and I try to explain to them as much as possible certain things that they don't understand. They've evolved with me in my postgraduate life, so they also understand what kind of person I am. And with the whole process, I've also understood what kind of person I am. So I know that I will not do well in a routine environment. I need constant, what do you call this? Like constant, I don't know, like I need to be galvanized by something. And this for me, doing research. So to ignite my passions and to make sure that I'm happy, they always promote do what makes you happy. And at this point in time in the global world, I think it's a perfect thing for us to go back to our families and make them see what the impact of research is. If you're looking at the COVID-19, for example, without researchers, they even know what COVID-19 is, which is a question that I always ask people who seem to think that what we're doing is not a job. Doing a master's degree or PhD or a postdoc is a job. You're contributing to science and therefore you're bettering people's lives. And I think that's a misconception that we do need to make sure that we stand firmly on and erase in an African context especially. So like you rightfully said, after doing a PhD, you could either go get a job in the industry or you could carry on doing academia. So apart from doing research, one of my passions is educating others and knowledge transfer. And I believe that this is a very good platform to do that, especially sharing your knowledge. It doesn't help to do a PhD and acquire all of this knowledge and generate new knowledge if you're not going to create a new generation of researchers. And for me, I think academia is the perfect place to do that. But at the same time, it gives me an opportunity to see what other people are thinking. Because I don't think it's possible when you've got an industry job to interact with so many researchers at once from different faculties in the same setting. So that for me is very important. So being a postdoc researcher also is a time for you to build your academic CV. So whether or not you want to end up in industry or in academia, this is just a time for you to conduct research that your research group is focusing on and for you to branch out as well and show your identity and your independence as a researcher. Because as I said, doing postgraduate studies also molds your mindset and the way that you're going to be approaching certain things in life, including whatever it is you're working on. So this is a good time for you to find out exactly what it is that you want to do as well. I know a lot of people that have done postdocs and have ended up with 3 jobs, and others who have ended up in academia. And some people toggle around the two. So it doesn't mean that everything is going to be closed off for you. But I think it's more important for people that want to go into academia because it's an important step ladder, so to say, to generate articles and to make sure that people know exactly who you are, what kind of research you stand for, and which direction you want to take it in.
No, you're right. And I love how you said earlier that there needs to be more to educate people, that postgrad studies is actually a job, like you said, especially in this climate that we are in during COVID-19. And I think one of those ways that we can educate people is through science communication. And I think with everybody, most of the people who've been following the series, we've been using this term a lot, science communication. And I know that's also one of your passions as well, to communicate science. better, can you also just highlight for me some projects that you've worked on in the past and any that you are currently involved in right now?
Wow, like I'm in like a couple of projects like right now. Well, in the past, it was obviously my PhD research, and
Mm.
from that branched out to me doing some photochemistry work with some collaborators of mine in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also had the opportunity to do some research on South African indigenous plants, their quality profiling, and the way that they've been used internationally. Because I feel that the international community doesn't understand what indigenous knowledge is, and at the
Okay.
same time, they try to explain things that we've been doing for years and years in a simplified context. And I think we need to also try to shy away from just isolating science from activities that have always been happening.
Mm.
I'm also working on projects on water bodies in South Africa. So we're looking at contaminants, and that's in the Mpumalanga province and in Bloemfontein as well. And I'm hoping to do some work with nanoparticles with some of my friends. So
Wow.
those are some happen
Can
to
you
me.
just elaborate on what that is? What
Uh,
are nanoparticles?
I think my friend could explain it better.
Okay.
Yeah, but nanoparticles means that they're extremely small. So if you're
Okay.
going to look at the number scale, meter is a 1 meter is bigger than 1,000 millimeters,
Yeah.
and 1,000 micrometers are smaller than 1 millimeter, for example.
Mm.
So the smaller you go, the less of it you see. So if you look at tiles, for example, versus granules, there's a
Yeah.
big difference. You can count how many tiles there are, but you can't really
Wow.
count how many granules there are. Yeah. So you have
All
to
right.
use like sophisticated analytical instrumentation to see that. But as you know, in medical applications and in other things, they are using nanoparticles, but people are not really studying their environmental chemistry and their fate. So that's what
Mm-hmm.
our research group is also focusing on, to look at, like, you are making these, they are helpful, but what happens when they go into a fish? What
Mm-hmm.
happens when they go into a human being? So it's
All right.
interesting.
So with all of these projects, are they linked to your PhD? And if not, how are you able to, I mean, sorry, not your PhD, your postdoc research. And if not, how are you able to juggle? Because it seems like it's a lot. How are you able to juggle all of that?
No, they are interlinked. So mostly when you are doing a postdoc, it's about applying your skill.
Okay.
So if I know that's what I'm going to be doing when I do my postdoc. Obviously, not divorcing it from whatever it is I did for my PhD. So right
Mm-hmm.
now, using the skills that I've acquired to try and answer a question that is interesting.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's that's very interesting. So there's a nice linkage.
Mm-hmm.
So as people might know that the root of the science is also working hand in hand with visibility in STEM Africa, and you've also been spotlighted on visibility in STEM Africa, and you've also been spotlighted. I mean, you've also been featured in a Forbes Science magazine. So congratulations for that, by the
Thank
way. So by doing these sorts of features and how do you think we can change the narrative surrounding the contributions of Africans to the global STEM research careers?
Like immensely, because
Mm,
it's going to be there forever. First of all, thanks you to the internet.
yeah.
So generations come up could actually know how we were thinking at the time when we were facing certain social issues and ills. and what kinds of challenges that we've had and how did we overcome them. But most importantly, because Africa is not usually seen as a basis or as a source of good science, we need to make sure that we make the world listen.
Yeah.
And they are hearing us. They are seeing that Africa is a good source of science. We've got dynamic people here, and we've got a lot of good work happening in the world. So I would say that these kinds of platforms are very important, not only to educate existing scientists, but the ones that are coming up, but also the ones that haven't yet even realized that they wanted to do science. But I also
Definitely.
think mostly people need to know what it is that we're doing. It's all good and well for me to want to publish my work in a journal, but if the ordinary person who lives in the study area I'm studying doesn't know what the research impact is, then what does it help them?
Yeah. True.
So we do need to communicate science a lot on every platform in every way, but targeted to the society and the communities that are mostly going to gain from it.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. And like you said, because of the internet, this podcast, that science feature in Forbes Science, it'll be
Mm-hmm.
there forever. So 20 years from now, you can even look back to be like, oh my word, I was actually talking about this. So it's pretty exciting that then people can be inspired, you know. So speaking about inspiration, what advice then would you give to an aspiring African scientist, you know, about getting into the STEM field, but more so I target this into your field of environmental chemistry, as well as also just what would you say to somebody who is maybe in the third year and currently it's really difficult to be motivated, especially with schoolwork, you know, to be motivated so that they can continue to study and maybe work towards where you are.
I think the most fundamental advice that I can give anybody doing anything anyway is that your future is always going to be in your hands, regardless of what your friend says or what your schoolmates say or whatever. Your life is always going to be in your hands. So, what difference can you make with the life that you've got? Can you make an impact else's life, whether it's directly or indirectly? And how do you plan on doing that? To think about what it is that you're passionate about and how you want the world to see you, but most importantly, how you want to see yourself. So I think
Wow.
that's plenary.
That's yeah, that like you said, it's not only it's not only for people on the STEM field. Anybody, wherever they are, can really use that advice, especially in this climate, to just continue pushing. And no matter where you are right now, I suppose there's not a definition of where you'll be in the future. And I'm sure I'm just going to ask you this again. Did you ever think you'd be where you are right now? Like when you look
No,
back, when you look
so
back.
honestly, the other thing that we need to start talking about are mental issues when you're doing postgraduate studies, because
Yeah.
like the final stretch of my PhD, I was feeling so depressed. I was feeling so bad. I was like, oh my God, what did I do with my life? Oh. But in the end, like the support that I got from my supervisors and my family meant a lot to me, because they made me realize that I have done it, that I have got this far, and that I need to be more proud of myself instead of putting myself down. So it's bittersweet, and that at the time I felt so bad about it, but right now I feel like it's a good thing that I did go through that. Now I can
Yeah.
advise someone else and let them know that it's okay, and there's other people that you can talk to.
Def-
So
Definitely. I love how you've touched on that. I can relate to that. I mean, just last year, the last stretch of my master's was utter hell. Like, I didn't even, you know, how everybody asks you, so what are you going to do right now? Or are you going to continue with your PhD? Um, you know, or there's just, you just think that this is where you are and you're never going to go anywhere else past this current state. And I'm sure near the end, I think it's common. It's really, really common to feel that way, and I can totally relate. But I'm just gonna bring it back to you. So you felt that way. Like, how on earth did you then talk yourself into going into postdoc?
I wonder, like having gotten over it, and I was like, I've gone to a couple of industry interviews, and I really don't kind of like the environment that they're presenting to me.
Yeah.
And I'm a professional student, honestly speaking. I've been a student since undergrad, a job like per se to go out of the academic field. So I'm used to that whole thing. So I felt like, no, let me just go and figure myself out. If I do still want to do an industry job at the end of my postdoc, then I'm going to do that. If I want to do an academic job, then I'm going to do that. If I want to start my own business and apply the skill that I've learned, then I'm going to do that. So it's a matter of figuring out where it is that you want to be. I think it's a good step for anybody to take, honestly, especially after PhD. You're mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually tired. Doing your post kind of puts that off of you because you don't have 3 years to run this marathon. You're things bit by bit, and you've got more structure to things. You've got more mentors, and you've got other postdocs that you can actually talk to. So I think that people could possibly or should possibly start looking at this as a more of a learning experience rather than having to go and build my profile and become an academic so I can become a professor. No, build academic profile, learn more about yourself outside of your supervisors, go to another institution, mingle with other postdocs, mingle with other researchers, because I know like a lot of people with projects with other professors that are postdocs, and they made these all these connections from drinking coffee in the morning, from attending a colloquium, from going to a conference together, and you realize where people are at as well, and how they got to where they are, and how they can assist you,
Yeah.
So just
That's
be open.
important. Yeah, just be open. And I think it goes back to it can also go to networking. But thank you so much for talking about your research and your journey. It was very interesting, and for also being very vulnerable and speaking about, like you said, your state that you went through during your PhD. We don't really talk about those mental health issues, and it's important that you brought this up now, that if anybody's feeling the way that they're feeling, to just take some time. Being an academic is hella stressful, and and look at you, you've gone to the other side and you've given really good advice. So thank you so much for coming on to the show and talking with us.
My pleasure.
It's been great. And for everybody else listening in at home, thank you so much for listening to the Root of the Science podcast with your girl and with an E. Until next time, bye.